In December of 1872, a British ship was found drifting in the Atlantic Ocean. Its sails were still raised. Its cargo was untouched. Food was still on the table. Personal belongings were still in their cabins. There were no signs of a struggle, no damage from a storm, no fire, no blood. But the entire crew had vanished. 10 people, including the captain, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter. The ship was called the Mary Celeste, and what happened aboard that vessel remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries in history. This is the Midnight Archives, where forgotten cases are reopened, and mysteries refuse to stay buried. The Mary Celeste was a merchant brigantine built for long ocean voyages. She was solid, well-constructed, and considered one of the safest ships of her time. Originally named the Amazon, the ship had already survived several storms and accidents. Some sailors believe she was cursed, others believe she was simply unlucky. But by 1872, she had a new owner, a new captain, and a new purpose. Her new captain was Benjamin Briggs. Briggs was an experienced seaman. He came from a long line of sailors. He was known as calm, disciplined, and deeply religious. He trusted his ship, he trusted his crew, and most importantly, he trusted the sea. On November 7th, 1872, the Mary Celeste left New York Harbor bound for Genoa, Italy. On board were 10 people: Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 7 crew members: Albert Richardson, the first mate; Andrew Gilling, the second mate; Edward Head, the cook; and 4 German sailors. The cargo consisted of more than 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, tightly sealed and stored below deck. The voyage was expected to take about 1 month. It was meant to be a routine crossing. No one expected the ship to vanish. For weeks, nothing unusual was reported. The Mary Celeste sailed east across the Atlantic, following common trade routes. The weather was typical for the season: cold, but manageable. Captain Briggs wrote several letters before departure. In one of them, he described the ship as being in excellent condition. In another, he wrote that he trusted his crew completely. Those letters would be the last words ever received from anyone aboard the Mary Celeste. Then, on December 5th, 1872, another vessel spotted a ship drifting near the Azores. The ship was called the Dei Gratia. Her captain, David Morehouse, had known Benjamin Briggs personally. The two men had even dined together before leaving New York. As the Dei Gratia approached the drifting vessel, something immediately felt wrong. The ship's movements were strange. Her sails were partially raised, but no one stood on deck. No signal flags, no response, no crew in sight. Morehouse ordered his men to investigate. When they climbed aboard, they were met with silence. It was the Mary Celeste, and she was completely abandoned. What they found inside was disturbing. The ship was seaworthy. There was no serious damage, no signs of a violent storm, no evidence of piracy. The cargo was intact. The personal belongings of the crew were still in their cabins. Money and valuables were untouched. In the galley, food had been prepared but never eaten. In the captain's quarters, toys belonging to little Sophia lay scattered on the bed. The navigation instruments were still in place. The ship's logbook had been carefully updated. The last entry was dated November 25th, 10 days before the ship was discovered. Nothing in the log suggested danger. It looked as if everyone had simply stood up and walked away. Only one thing was missing: the lifeboat, which meant the crew had not been taken by force. They had chosen to leave. But why abandon a perfectly functional ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? Weather records showed no major storms in the area. The ship was not taking on water. There was no fire. There was no clear reason to leave, unless the crew believed something terrible was about to happen. Investigators began searching for explanations. One theory suggested that fumes from the alcohol cargo caused panic. Industrial alcohol can leak vapor. Those vapors are highly flammable. If the crew smelled strong fumes, they may have feared an explosion. Perhaps Captain Briggs ordered everyone into the lifeboat temporarily. Perhaps he planned to tow it behind the ship until the danger passed. But if that was the case, why were they never seen again? The sea was calm. The weather was manageable. They should have been able to return, unless something went terribly wrong. Another theory suggested an underwater earthquake, a sudden shockwave, a violent jolt, enough to convince the crew that the ship was breaking apart, enough to make them flee in terror. But when the ship was examined, no structural damage was found. No cracks, no flooding, no broken hull. The Mary Celeste was perfectly intact. Some believe pirates were responsible, but pirates steal cargo. The alcohol was untouched. So were all valuables. Others suggested mutiny, but Captain Briggs was respected by his crew. There was no history of conflict, and no signs of violence, no blood, no struggle, no weapons drawn. It was as if the ocean itself had erased them. The lifeboat was never found, and that raised even more questions. Lifeboats of that era were not designed for long voyages. They had no navigation equipment, no protection from storms, limited food and water. If the crew drifted, they would not have survived long. Yet not a single body was ever recovered. Not one. No wreckage, no floating debris, no sign of a struggle. It was as if 10 people had vanished into thin air. When the ship was brought back to land, an investigation followed. A court examined every detail: the hull, the cargo, the logbook, the crew's belongings. They searched for evidence of crime. They found none. They searched for evidence of accident. They found none. They searched for evidence of sabotage. They found none. The official verdict was simple: unknown cause. The Mary Celeste was returned to service. She sailed again. But her reputation never recovered. Sailors refused to work aboard her. Owners struggled to insure her. Eventually, she was abandoned and left to rot. But her story lived on. More than 150 years later, the mystery remains unsolved. No bodies, no explanation, no final message. 10 people left a ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and were never seen again. What made them abandon safety? What were they running from? And what happened to the lifeboat? The sea never gave back its answer. This was the Midnight Archives.